This webinar and the materials, such as videos contained therein, contain personal and/or confidential information and is intended for TDSB internal use only. Any disclosure, copying, storage, or distribution of these materials is strictly prohibited by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, Policy P094, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy, and Operational Procedure PR676, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Welcome to part 2 of Developing Emotional Literacy. This webinar on self-regulation is the second in a series of webinars brought to you from the Speech Language Pathology Department at the TDSB. Today we are going to explain what self-regulation is. We will also explain the connection between self-regulation and language skills. Then we will discuss specific aspects of self-regulation. And finally, we will provide an opportunity to try out some of the tools you will learn about in this webinar. We discussed co-regulation in our first webinar. This webinar will focus on self-regulation. So what is self-regulation? The following definition comes from a book called Self-Reg Schools by Stuart Shanker, a Canadian research professor, along with Susan Hopkins, an education specialist. Self-regulation simply refers to how we manage stress or challenging moments. Remember, what might seem like minor or trivial problems to us might cause enormous stress to kids. Child stress and what we think of as adult stress are both stress nonetheless. How one manages stress may be maladaptive or upsetting to others. For example, a child might be running around a classroom, which helps his or her body calm down and feel better, but that behavior disrupts the rest of the class. What we want to see is mindful or planned self-regulation. This means learning to recognize and respond to all different types of stress without upsetting others as much as possible. The research tells us that working on developing self-regulation skills often improves focus and attention, independent work, and positive behavior with peers or adults. So self-regulation helps children thrive, which is what we all want to see. So let's think, how do we help students with self-regulation skills? Teachers and parents use language to develop these self-regulation skills and create calming strategies. It is important to always consider the child's language knowledge when teaching them to self-regulate. Let's look at some examples of what I mean. We always need to be mindful of the vocabulary we are using, especially when we use metaphorical language or sayings. So, for example, if you heard, "You look down in the dumps," it means you look sad. Or, "The classroom is a zoo," means the classroom is too loud and active. Or, "He is a night owl," means he stays up too late at night. We know our kids with autism or ASD often have difficulty with this kind of figurative language, but many children we know have difficulty understanding language for a variety of reasons. So, what most often looks like a child who is not listening may actually be a child with difficulty understanding language, as well as poorly developed self-regulation skills. Our kids with special needs, such as students with learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, ADHD, trauma experiences, and an anxiety disorder, just to name a few, often need the most support with these skills. A child or adult who may seem like he or she is not listening or being rude may be a person under a lot of stress. We all have moments when we do not handle stress well. In this clip from the Pixar movie Inside Out, this family has just moved from Minnesota to California. That is a very stressful event for the whole family. Riley, the little girl, is feeling sad and homesick for her friends and interests in Minnesota, while her parents are asking her to be happy and think about the good things about their new home. Each of these three family members has little colorful feeling characters inside their minds, like anger, disgust, joy, sadness, and fear. Let's see how their stress can lead to some big reactions as they eat dinner together.
So, how was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay,
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Something is definitely going on.
She's never acted like this before. What should we do? We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband. Ahem.
With a nice pass over to Reed, comes across that right.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
He's making that stupid face again.
I could strangle him right now.
Signal him again.
So, Riley, how was school?
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
Boo! I'll be Joy.
School was great, all right?
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
What is her deal? All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude. No. Stay happy!
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it!
Yeah, well...
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
Just shut up!
Fire!
That's it. Go to your room. Now.
Foot is down. The foot is down.
Good job, gentlemen. That could have been a disaster.
Well, that was a disaster.
This previous movie clip ties nicely to the next several slides that come directly from Dr. Stuart Shanker's Self-Reg website. His website provides lots of information, online courses, and graphics to understand this topic. The link is displayed in the slide. So these slides provide some of the most important information to help us change the way we think about behavior and how to help kids with challenging behaviors. This first slide is about the difference between misbehavior and stress behavior. When a child is misbehaving, he or she could have chosen to act differently or could have made good choices. When a child is showing stress behaviors, the child is not fully aware of what he or she is doing or why and cannot act differently. We think of this state as fight, flight, or freeze when the thinking part of the brain is not working properly. I ask you to consider for a moment the idea that most of the challenging behaviors that we see in kids is stress behavior and not misbehavior. I know many of us see a lot of behaviors as manipulative or attention seeking. But I want you to consider for a moment that by far most of the behaviors and the challenging behaviors, especially that we see in kids, are due to stress behaviors because children are under an awful lot of stress these days that we don't realize. This next slide points out that self-regulation and self-control are not the same things. So self-regulation tries to calm reactions and behaviors by understanding and dealing with the root causes. It focuses on social situations, not just the individual. While self-control tries to manage behaviors only once they are seen, self-regulation looks at reducing the causes of the behavior. So self-control ties to building character, mainly by asking the person to change. We often do this with rewards and punishment. How do you think our kids with self-regulation difficulties feel when we focus on improving their willpower to change their character? In this visual, for students who cannot control their impulses, this adds more stress, which leads to more challenging behaviors, which then leads to shame, and then this cycle continues. Here we can see many children who are showing stress behaviors as they feel different uncomfortable feelings. The signs of stress behavior from the Self-Reg website include more impulsive behavior, difficulty ignoring distractions, seeing everything negatively, erratic mood swings, trouble listening, and they say things that just do not make sense. So when we hear those descriptions, we can sometimes picture some of our kids or students who are really having some difficulty with self-regulation. So the big challenge is figuring out why our children's stress is so high. Stuart Shanker asks us to become stress detectives. We need to investigate and identify possible causes of challenging behaviors. Here are the 5 domains of stress we can consider. The first is biological, which includes children who are more sensitive to noises, crowds, too much visual stimulation. They may not get enough exercise. They may not get enough sleep, and they might not eat well. The next domain is the emotional domain. When we think of children who have very strong emotions, sometimes they're positive. These are kids who get really overly excited and disruptive, or negative feelings such as anger and fear. The third domain is the cognitive domain, which involves difficulty processing certain kinds of information. This type of information may be difficulty processing memory, processing auditory information, or children who have difficulty processing language. In the social domain, some children have difficulty picking up on social cues or understanding the effect of their behavior on others. The pro-social domain involves kids who pick up on other people's stress. So they become more stressed when they're surrounded by people who are stressed. So when we look at the diagram of the iceberg, we see the tip of the iceberg, which is the behavior that we see, while the domains lie hidden underneath the water level. Let's look at an example here. Here are 2 children who both consistently have difficulty playing with their peers, sharing toys, taking turns, and allowing others to join in their play. Let's think, what domain do you see as being the possible stressors here? You can pause the video and think about the different domains and what might be causing those behaviors. And then we'll reflect upon it in a moment. So first, let's look at the social domain. They may be having trouble reading nonverbal communication, and they might often misinterpret others. In the prosocial domain, they may be picking up a lot of the stress from their parents, financial or marital stress. In the cognitive domain, maybe they don't have the language skills to express feelings and negotiate with peers. In the biological domain, they may not sleep well at night. And finally, in the emotional domain, maybe they experience very strong emotions during social experiences. These are just a few smart guesses. There are lots of ideas within each domain, and I'm sure all your ideas that you may have had are great ones. I think the trick is to really, when we're thinking about our kids and our students, is to try and dig a little deeper to think what might be causing their stress. Let's look at some self-regulation strategies now. There are many strategies we can use to teach self-regulation skills, depending on the moment. We can model or show our own strategies to stay calm. We can teach our children about socially connecting with others, such as teaching about tone of voice and body language, and we can teach turn-taking skills, to name a few. This picture shows an example of teaching a self-regulation strategy while playing a board game. We can teach kids how to lose a game without becoming too upset by losing a game on purpose, to model how to lose and to be a good sport. So in this example, Dad says, I think I might lose this one. Maybe I'll do better next time. And then his son's reaction is, yes, Dad, you'll have more luck next time. Also, when our kids are about to lose a game, we can warn them ahead of time and provide some language to self-regulate. So for example, you could say, looks like you might lose this one, but don't forget, you won last time. So let's give it a try. For a child who is showing stress behaviors, think about 1 or 2 stress domains. What is hiding below the tip of the iceberg? What strategy could you use to support that child? This slide provides some strategies for each domain. Although the ideas in this chart were designed to support students in classrooms, the ideas can easily be adapted to use at home as well. So we can see in this chart the domains, the possible stressors, and a few examples of some strategies. In summary, this webinar helps us see behaviors differently with empathy or the point of view of the child and the underlying causes. So let's review the plan. Over the next week, think about your child or one of your students who shows a lot of stress behaviors. Choose 1 or 2 domains and uncover some possible underlying reasons for the behaviors. And then finally, try a strategy to support that child in that domain. You can rewind this webinar to look at previous slides, and especially take a look at slide 17 that has examples of the domains and possible strategies. This webinar was brought to you by the TDSB Speech Language Pathology Department. In this slide, you'll find links to our resources and ideas online, and you can follow us on social media.